Thank you.
I want to thank Rabbi Willig for the evening. It's late in the evening already, and it's been a very long day, but really for every day, which is a long day for him, for the hadracha that he gives to so many of the Rabbanim in the field, and the questions that he answers, and the sensitivity that he shows in answering them and answering those questions. So we really very much appreciate it. Rabbi Willig, before we call on you, I'd like to introduce Rabbi Daniel Kramer, who is the chair of our healthcare chaplains group. We also have Rabbi Ira Cronenberg, who's the chair of the military chaplains, and we have a couple of military chaplains with us as well. Rabbi Kramer.
And just on behalf of all of us, especially those who may not be CA members, just the opportunity to thank Mark Dratch, our executive vice president of the RCA, who has done a yeoman job in these last couple of months, and just almost every day with shias and shuvas and information and updates and suggestions. It's just been a wonderful opportunity to have him available as such a wonderful resource that we all need, especially in this time. I also want to express my sincerest appreciation to Rav Willig for joining us, and these are Rabbanim, these are chaplains, healthcare chaplains, and military chaplains who are dealing with some of the major problems worldwide, and we thank you, Rabbi Willig, for your hadracha. I thought it was only appropriate that before we actually begin the call, that Mark Gratz will moderate it, ask the permanent international president of Nefesh, the Association of Jewish Chaplains, Rabbi Kinsbrunner, to lead us in the Kapitel Tehillim, so that all of our voices can join together as one b'tfilah.
That was bomb.
Hi, everybody. It's a honor to be on this call and serving many of our Jewish chaplains as the president of the NAJC. And since I know some people are maybe on the road or kind of wherever they are, we'll do a chapter Kuf Lamed, because I think we all know that by heart and probably have been saying that a lot these days. So please join with me together. Shir Ma'alot Mimamakim Kraticha Adonai Adonai Shima Bekoli Tiena Aznecha Kashivot Lekol Tachanunai Im Avona Tishmarya Adonai Mi Ya'amod Ki Imcha Haslicha Leman Tivarei Kiviti Adonai Kivta Nafshi V'li Baro Hochalti Nafshi L'Adonai Mishamrim Laboker Shamrim Laboker Yachel Yisrael El Adonai Ki Im Rabbi Mofadu. Who Yiftet Yisrael Mikol Avonotav.
Rabbi Dratch, please. Thank you very much for you.
Thank you very much. So I asked Rabbi Willig to begin with some divrei chizuk, following which questions and answers. We have a relatively small crowd tonight. A few questions have been submitted prior, which I'll share with you, and then after that we'll open it up for general discussion, if that's okay.
It must be very difficult, especially for the healthcare chaplains who are on the front lines. If I understand correctly, perhaps even some of the military chaplains are on the front lines, not as been understood by military chaplains previously in various war zones, but different types of war zones. That's the word that's been used to describe what's going on in the hospitals. They're like war zones. They're being overwhelmed. I'm speaking to you from New York City, perhaps the capital of this terrible disease. Some want to call it the epicenter. Whatever name you give it, the healthcare systems are being strained beyond capacity. And being a chaplain, trying to give support in these times is very, very challenging. Given the fact that I'm sure that in many of the situations, even you may not be allowed into certain rooms. Certainly, in nearly all areas in New York, they're not letting the next of kin, they're not letting the spouses, the children, come to the room. It's incredible. Never happened before in our memory, such a thing. Someone is in the hospital, the primary support group in the non-medical area are the spouses and the children. Can't go in. Too dangerous. Too dangerous for you, too dangerous for the patient. Can't go in. You got a call from downstairs or from the house to get updates, which are always sketchy and unsatisfying, and sometimes even tragic. And here you have a chaplain trying to give chizuk. It's very difficult, very challenging. It's no secret here how serious this disease is. Sometimes people who are sick don't realize how sick they are. Sometimes it's a blessing in disguise. Here everybody understands what we're dealing with. And then you have to, sometimes in your capacity as a chaplain, give chizuk to the families. Sometimes they're downstairs, they won't let it in. You have to sometimes bring difficult news to them. Not an easy time to be a healthcare chaplain at all. And as I said before, the military, it's also not easy. So how do you do it? How can you do it? The answer is that you have to be strong and maintain your strength and your composure and even some touch of optimism in order to help others. To help another person, you have to be strong yourself. Of course, I'm certain that you have concerns about members of your own personal households. After all, you are exposed with masks, without masks, with gloves, without gloves, more than the average citizen. Because if you're working in a hospital, near a hospital, of course, you must take proper precautions. And if your doctor tells you that you may not go there, you may not go there. Pikuach nefesh is docha everything. You have to be cognizant of your own personal health. The different categories of individuals are at higher risk. And those individuals must work very hard to protect themselves, even by working, as we say, remotely. You get the list of the families whose relatives are in the hospital, you call them remotely. Don't go there if you're at a higher risk. It's not allowed according to the halacha. Either way, whether you're there or calling from afar, you must be strong. You have to exhibit emunah in Hashem, faith in the Ribono Shel Olam. As the Rambam writes at the beginning of Hilchos Tanis, when a tzara comes to Am Yisrael, our response is, it's not chas v'sholom a coincidence. If you say that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu can give Chalila even worse punishment. You consider to be cruel by the Rambam. But rather, you understand it comes from the Ribono Shel Olam. It's a wake-up call for us to do tshuva, for us to daven to Kadosh Baruch Hu. This is a message to you and to me. And this is a message we are duty-bound to impart to all those who would listen, including patients who are ill, their relatives, anybody with whom you interact, again, either in person or remotely. This is the most important message. The message really humility. No hubris here. We thought we were big knackers, No. The Kadosh Baruch Hu was in charge. Vashamayal mimal v'aloretz b'tochas ein od. There's no other force. No other force will be able to guarantee us health. Doesn't matter how wise, how wealthy, and how strong. We've seen all these individuals unfortunately fall. The wealthy, the wise, the strong. We cry when we think about it. Those who have fallen already, people who fall into those categories in great measure. But Kadosh Baruch Hu, in His infinite wisdom, has taken some of them from us, and others are in great peril. We must bow our heads to the Kadosh Baruch Hu and say, Hatzur Tamim Pa'alo. Words you know very well from your professional lives. We have to internalize it. That what's happening now is a wake-up call from Hashem, as the Rambam tells us, to greater intensity in our tefillah, even as we are davening privately in our homes, greater intensity of tshuva, as is explicit in the Rambam, the beginning of Hilchos Tanios. These are what we're supposed to do. Tshuva means regretting our mistakes, confessing them, and resolving to correct them. Tefillah means not lip service, but intense prayer. I'm convinced that many of you on the screen are similar to myself. Now that we're davening at home, no one's waiting for us, no one's seeing us. We can daven longer with greater intensity, focusing on the words better than we are in the front of a community that's looking at us, and we can't go too long, as it says in the Gemara. Now we have the ability to daven with greater length and with greater strength. May all of our tefillos ascend to the heavens and bring about a complete Yeshua and a complete refuah. Amen v'amen.
Amen. Thank you very, very much. So, Rabbi Willig, the first question that was sent, would it be an issue of Lifnei Iver to provide Jewish residents in a senior care facility who are quarantined in their rooms and who are known to already watch TV with information on watching pre-recorded Siddurim and Tefillot?
Not Lifnei Iver at all. I think each and every one of them should see pre-recorded Seder. But they should see it before Pesach. That's what some of you may have read, what Rabbi Rimon of Alon Shvut wrote beautifully. I confess that I said it to my people before I read it, that instead of zooming on Pesach, which some have suggested, which is fraught with terrible problems of all sorts, the better option is to zoom before Pesach. These people who are confined to their rooms, if they have Zoom in the room, and some of the people could be pretty techie, some not, but at least they can watch a pre-recorded Seder. Ask them to please watch it at 5 o'clock next week, next Wednesday, 5 o'clock, and finish it by 7 o'clock before it gets dark. It's a tremendous mitzvah. It is true, Rabbi Dratch, that some of these individuals may decide to start at 8 and end at 10. That can happen, but it doesn't have to be that way. You ask them to see it from 5 to 7. You say after 7, the sun sets is about 7:30 approximately. So after 7, you got to turn off the TV. They listen. We hope they will. They won't. It's their business, and you are not over Lifnei Iver at all.
Thank you. With the recent uptick in conversations with nations legislating across the board cremation for people who die from COVID-19, what is our role as rabbis and healthcare chaplains in working with our families in the event that this should be an issue that we face in the United States or wherever the chaplains are? Given the sense in parts of New York about morgues being overrun, this might be a concern in the near future.
In Yitzhak Hashem, it'll never be a concern where we are, not because we are oblivious to Chalila V'chas, a rise in deaths as a result of this virus. But we have, thankfully, large, empty cemeteries. We have capable Chevra Kadishas. We have loyal funeral directors. Yes, it's true. The head of the National Association of Chevra Kadisha, Rabbi Elchanan Zono, I'm sure you all know, has relaxed significantly the procedures of Chevra Kadisha. And there are other rabbis who want to completely eliminate Aros, as may have been done in the Holy Land. But this does not mean that we should not exercise all of our strength to fulfill the mitzvah of burial in the earth, cover tikbarenu. This is a mitzvah which we are required to do our utmost to protect. I'm told that in Nevada, they prohibited burial and they demanded cremation. I believe it was the Aguda that fought it there and was victorious. For a carve-out, we can't solve all the world's problems, but if an Orthodox Jew who believes in burial in the ground as a biblical commandment requests it, it is being offered by the government, notwithstanding the general requirement for cremation. I believe that in the states that you are in, is anybody here from Nevada? Don't know if there are any chaplains in Nevada, but in the states that you're in at the present time, there's no such ordinance, and I do believe if Khalila, it comes to the point where legislation must be enacted in other states, and we're not here to argue because they have to deal with things, that I believe there will be an exception made for Orthodox Jews who believe so strongly in burial in the ground. That's my read. If chas v'shalom, I'm wrong, and some state decides to insist on cremation and will not allow anyone to be buried in that state, should never come to that. We'd be required by law, if the law would allow it, to bury the person in a different state, reminiscent of what happens in Antwerp. Antwerp is in Belgium. All the burials are in Holland. They actually cross to a different country. If one state would outlaw burials, we would have to take the body, if they will allow us, to a different state for burial. Hope it never comes to that.
Thank you. With regard to concerns of mental and psychological spiritual support for people in senior care facilities or hospitals who are quarantined in their apartments or their rooms, and for the staff who are caring for them, does the healthcare chaplain have an obligation to be on call on Shabbos or Yontif? Would one be permitted to carry a cell phone, make calls, make a visit for someone in distress?
The word distress is a very broad term. I would assume that everybody on this call is in distress. How can you not be in distress? What's going on around us? Distress does not rise to the level of pikuach nefesh. There can be psychiatric cases where there's literally a fear that someone could chas v'shalom harm himself or herself, commit suicide. This clearly is a pikuach nefesh situation, would warrant anything. Driving on Shabbos, whatever has to be done, has to be done. So the answer to your question, it depends if anyone in the section that a particular healthcare chaplain is in charge of is considered to be suicidal, chas v'shalom. If yes, then that chaplain must carry around or keep on, no one's going anywhere, must keep on a cell phone or some kind of phone. And if there's a caller ID and it's coming from your hospital that you're in charge of, you must pick it up, because why are they calling you? They're not calling you just to find out what parasha it is. They're calling to find out that someone is in distress, which is possibly suicidal. And then if it's in fact suicidal, you get in your car and go and run to the hospital. But that's a far cry for what we call distress. Distress could mean anything at a much lower level. If it's just distress, then the rabbi should not be responding by driving to the hospital. You may have to respond to pick up the phone because you're not sure at the beginning, is it distress or is it rise to the level of potential suicide? So the answer in brief, to save a life, anything can be done. To save a person from distress that everyone is in, almost nothing can be done.
Okay, thank you. Rabbi Blank sent me 5 pages of criteria that some hospitals in New York State are now using to determine who goes on a respirator and who stays on a respirator. And because of the lack, unfortunately, of respirators and the great need, it's possible that somebody will come into an emergency room and need a respirator but not be put on it because they don't meet this criteria. If the chaplain is consulted by an ethics committee or by the hospital in some way, what is he suggest to them?
Now we're discussing questions of life and death. These are not easy questions to answer. It was just today, I believe, that Rav Shechter Shlita issued a somewhat revised ruling from yesterday's ruling, which addresses these issues. And if you're following Rav Shechter at gmail.com, Every other response was both in Hebrew and in English, except for this one. This is only in Hebrew. It's too sensitive to be translated by him into English, although I'm sure others will, but at least it's not his. There, he issues an absolute prohibition, which I believe Rabbi Drash publicized 3 weeks ago. One may not take someone off a ventilator to save somebody else. Rav Shechter Shalita considered that to be a possibility of ritzicha, of murder, which is not allowed. And therefore, despite the fact that the governments, I know, are advocating that in certain situations, they have 4 colors, there's red, there's blue, there's green, there's yellow. A Torah Jew may not participate in that. My doctor friends tell me the doctors themselves never would disconnect from the ventilator. It's a respiratory expert. It's a different category of individuals. Not that many of them are Jews, or certainly not Torah Jews. I do not believe a doctor has the halachic right to order this to be done. He can plead conscience. My conscience does not allow me to do it. The doctor is not required to put up a fight if it's being done. It's a futile fight. It won't work anyway. If the government and the hospitals make this decision, it's going to happen no matter what. Perhaps the frum doctor or frum healthcare chaplain should just walk away, so as not to be in what might be called the scene of a crime, which Rav Shechter likens to Ritzicha. On the other hand, if someone comes into the hospital and is in distress, is having trouble breathing, and in normal times, they put the person on a respirator, be on for a day, get off. Today, there are not enough respirators to go around. And Rav Shechter Shlita wrote over there, if Reuven comes in, under normal situations, first come, first served. Today, there's something called triage. And halacha recognizes triage. The last Mishnah in Horios tells you who comes first, who comes later. And then we know the famous end that a mamzer Talmid Chacham comes before a Kohen Gadol Amoritz, because Torah is Yikar Mipninim. We all know that. We never thought we'd have to deal with it in our lives. But now we have to deal with it. And in his Rav Shechter's opinion, if 2 people come, doesn't matter who comes first. By the time one person came, there's someone else just behind him, or he's around the corner in the ambulance on a cell phone, or we know he's going to come because it's been coming at such a pace for the last few days or weeks. We know there are others coming, and those others have a much better chance for survival. So in certain limited cases, we'd have to tell the first patient in and his family, I'm very sorry, Mr. Plony, Mrs. Plony, we cannot put you on a respirator. Please forgive us. We have out of respirators, and we have only X amount, and we have to do what we have to do. To say that to somebody is like telling them the worst news they ever heard in their life. But since we cannot take people off the respirator, as they're doing in certain hospitals, the only halachically proper way to have the triage is to not put them on in the first place, as difficult as that is.
So what would be the situation where a respirator was available? Could the family make a decision not to put the person on the respirator?
That's a very good question. Normally, the answer to that question is no. A person who has trouble breathing, you have to put him on a respirator if it's available. Today, it depends, at least in some measure, on that individual's prognosis. For example, if somebody who has a very, very serious pre-existing condition, and the doctors say to this family and to the person, him or herself, listen, if you want, we'll try to find the ventilator respirator for you. But we're telling you, given the fact that you seem to be COVID positive, and given your pre-existing condition, even in the unlikely chance that you will survive the next 2 weeks, which is unlikely given your your frailty. But even if you would survive the 2 weeks, you would never, ever be able to get off a ventilator because your lungs would be so compromised by that time. And the patient says, I'm not interested in that kind of a life. I do not want to be hooked up to a ventilator. Take me home. That request is not an irrational request. And as you know, we do believe in a measure of patient autonomy. This is not an unreasonable, irrational request to go home, even though we know what that means. If the alternative is most likely not making the 2 weeks, 2 weeks on the ventilator, and if you do, you're in a ventilator forever, which is, of course, not an easy way to live. That is a request which, if it's made, should be honored. I don't know if you're even required to try to talk the person out of it in that case. On the other hand, the person is healthy, just says, I don't want to go on a ventilator. We have to try our best to convince him otherwise, because he has an excellent chance of survival, and after the 2 weeks on the ventilator, he can come home. We know, by now we know, so many of the people who were on it and came home, and they're healthy, thank God. The ventilators do work to save lives. We would encourage such a person to accept an offer to go on a ventilator.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to open up the floor for questions. It's a little bit difficult on Zoom, but we'll do the best that we can. Is there anybody who would like to pose a question to Rob Willig? If you're on mute, you need to unmute yourself before asking the question.
Drat Shmuel Felsenberg.
Yes.
Rabbi Willig, good evening. Shmuel Felsenberg, I'm an active duty Army chaplain. Wanted to ask you a question with the whole COVID thing that is going on, and it's a matter fairly nogea to my family. If there is a relative who passes away, in terms of what is done at the funeral, sitting Shiva, and or being able to recite Kaddish, do you have any guidance or aids?
I have to follow the rules. The rules are no personal Shiva visits. I repeat, no personal Shiva visits, only remote, whether it be by phone or by WhatsApp or by Zoom or by text, or you know this better than me. That's how the Shiva visits, in quotes, have to be performed. It's a great mitzvah to Menachem Avel. The poskim say even in the good times, a partial fulfillment exists on the telephone, probably even more so by Zoom. Today, the most important mitzvah is Pikuach Nefesh. Therefore, no Shiva visits whatsoever. Absolutely none. Kaddish, no Kaddish whatsoever. Because we're not allowed to have a minyan. All the shuls that I know about are closed, as they should be. And these makeshift backyard minyanim, I'm very strongly opposed to, because even if you do it properly, the next guy will not do it properly. I think by now, just about all the responses the Rabbanim have come out against not only shuls, but also against these makeshift minyanim. And therefore, Kaddish cannot be said. But what's the purpose of Kaddish? Yiskada v'yiskada shmei Rabba. Person died, left a vacuum, a void, and the children are trying to fill that void by saying those 4 magic words. The greatest Kiddush Hashem is staying home. If you're seen going out and congregating in synagogues or nearby or in backyards, I don't want to say what it means. It's the opposite of Kiddush Hashem. These people aren't worried about endangering themselves and others. That's going to go through the minds of everybody who sees it. And with some measure of correctness, even though they do take precautions, but no one knows that, and others may not take their precautions, we've already seen in many occasions. Please, such a tragedy takes place, don't compound the tragedy. Stay safe. Stay safe. No Kaddish, no minyan, no Shiva visits. Fulfill the mitzvah Nicham Avelim on the phone or some other remote way.
And Rabbi, just one thing, on the front end of that actual funeral itself, her in this particular case, there's over a dozen kindlech, all grown people. So there's numerous people who would, is there a cutoff as to whether even the immediate Avalim should not even attend, or leave it just to a minion, or not even that?
Well, in some situations, our hands are tied. I know for a fact, northern New Jersey, not far from my home, one of the cemeteries will only allow 3 people aside from the rabbi. No exception. Another one, 5. No exceptions. Other ones, they'll allow what they call the next of kin. Then I used to big families. They can't believe the 15 people show up. We only want the next of kin. We're all next of kin. Takes a while for them to get it. There are other cemeteries that are allowing people who are not the next of kin. They wanted to keep proper distance. And even in some cases, I know a case happened just yesterday, the cemetery called Mount Hebron, right in the middle of Queens, near Kew Garden Hills, where I grew up. There was a burial. There were 12 men over bar mitzvah. The undertakers allowed these 12 men to do the entire burial, everything. I was a little surprised. Now, is it a good idea? I'm not sure. It can be done responsibly, but some rabbanim are saying, don't do it, because of what we call low plug. You'll do it responsibly. The next guy may not do it responsibly. That's a judgment call. I'm not here to paskin for the whole world. But some rabbanim say we should make a low plug. No one should go to a burial. Should be one person there to make sure that the non-Jews do it properly. Maybe you need 2 people to witness it. One can have a Zoom camera to make sure it's done, people can see it. And they're advocating that the non-Jews should do the whole thing from top to bottom. Others say no. It can be done responsibly and just make sure no one is in danger. Wear masks, wear gloves, or whatever it may be. I'm not here to decide between these giants. I'm just letting you know, whatever you have to do to keep safe, that's the first priority.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Just to follow up about funerals, and then, I'm sorry, 1 second, just to follow about funerals, and then we'll go to Rabbi Kramer. It was told to me by one of our chaverim that he has rabbinic colleagues in his town that don't want to participate in the funerals. They're afraid to go, and have recommended or suggested that they participate through Zoom.
Good.
So
Great.
this is a case of, so would a Rav have the right to say I'm not attending?
Yes.
Okay. Rabbi Kramer.
Shalom, thank you, Reb Willig. With so many elderly people having to run their Seder for the first time, and of course with the clock change and our Yatam being later, is there any opportunity for those in nursing homes? We are dealing with those who are very sick, with perhaps those who are elderly, with a time frame where they perhaps can make Kiddush earlier Leil Seder.
That's a very good question. Yeah, the Shulchan Aruch says they are not supposed to make Kiddush until it's dark. Dark means Tzeis HaKochavim. New York, it's approximately 8 p.m. Some individuals can't stay up past 9 p.m. That's it. Can you get a whole Seder in from 8 to 9? I say the answer is yes. Yes. You may have to skip certain things. You may have to prioritize. The whole meal they'll have much earlier. Now it's true, we know, we all know these things, but for people who are elderly, we may have to forego that stringency. If possible, they should eat much earlier. But if not, let them just not wash and have vegetables and fruits, and perhaps even meat is not a violation if you look at the small print in the beginning of our Beit Pesachim. So the meals behind them, they should sing the songs before that, what we call Nirtza, start with that. And then, if at 8 o'clock on the dot, they say Kiddush, this 1, 2, 3, Kiddush, Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, Yachatz, Magid, perhaps a truncated Magid. You can skip significant parts of Magid if necessary. Motzi, Matzah, Mora, Korach, Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch is just an egg. That's it. Everything's done already. Borech Halal, Nirtza, you said before already. I believe it can be done in an hour. I think so. Now, so if you could stay up from 8 to 9, there could be extreme cases where they cannot even stay up that late. They have to be in bed by 7:30, which is Shkia. They have to be in bed. What are you going to do? They can't, even the end of the Seder is before the sun sets. What do you do with them? The only thing to do in such extreme situations is to rely on a minority view, a little known minority view, which says, notwithstanding the ochlos habasa balayla hazeh, it has to be night. That's what almost all Rishonim say. You cannot accept Pesach early. It's not like Shabbos, not like other Yom Tovim. There's a minority view that says that you can. And therefore from Plag HaMincha, which is a relative hour and a quarter before sun, then, just as you can make Kiddush then, as we well know, Kedav Marav then, can even fulfill the mitzvahs of the Seder then. That's obviously only pulled out as a last resort. A last resort. Then you can start as early as Plag HaMincha. Plag HaMincha is a little after 6 in these parts of the world. And then they can even be in bed by 7:30 if necessary by Shkia. That's only in an extreme situation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rabbi Admon, you had your hand up?
Yes, hi, it's Admon from Pittsburgh. Rabbi Willig, I missed the session about the Tahara. If we're dealing with a non-Jewish funeral home that not willing so much to give us or let us do Tahara in their facility, are we required to push them to do it, or what's the
Every
situation?
situation is different. You can request it.
I'm not talking about somebody that passed away for Corona. I'm talking about a person that just passed away because, sick person.
Unfortunately, in today's climate, every patient who comes in is presumed to have Corona. If they died from something else, but maybe they had Corona too. And it's not a complete paranoia. It's known to happen. Someone has an underlying condition. Someone survived and was taken by Corona, even though they passed away from the original condition on the death certificate. It's been known to happen more than once. So we're not here to ask people to put themselves into danger, to change what they want to do. Every one of us to know how much you can push, where he has to stop pushing. The biggest priority is burial in the ground, not cremation. The biggest priority is burial in the ground, not cremation. So if you cannot do a Tara, so there's no Tara, can't help it. Some say we shouldn't do Taras at all because it may have some measure of danger. I would say that the second most important thing is making sure that the person is in fact buried in the ground. It's a very serious question whether someone who's buried in a non-biodegradable plastic sack is considered buried in the ground. It's not the same as a wooden coffin. It's even worse than a metal coffin. Metal comes from the ground. It's plastic, it's synthetic, and it's non-biodegradable. The person will just not decompose ever. If you look at Moshe's Tshuva about burial, I believe it's Yordea, I think it's Chelek Gimel, Mem Gimel, if memory serves. He explains that there are two problems. One is halacha demands burial in the ground, and one is not allowing the body to be in a place where there's no decomposition. Rav Moshe Feinstein writes in that tshuva and in another tshuva in Even Ezer Siman, Chelek Gimel Siman Lamed Gimel, I believe, that burying in plastic is not allowed. It calls it an Isur Gadol. So if you're not going to do a Tahara, the very least you can try to do is have the mace taken out of that plastic bag and put into an aron and buried with a tachrichem on top. You don't have to do a halbasha. Just do the minimum. That's the worst thing to avoid is cremation, of course. The next thing to avoid is burial in a plastic bag, which is almost not in the karka. It's in a separate unit. So those are the two main things to avoid.
Thank you. We had somebody with the named Galaxy S8. I don't know who you are
Yeah.
behind there,
That's
but your hand is up.
Simcha Silverman.
Hi, Rabbi Drash. Thank you. It's Simcha Silverman. Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Willig. I work in a hospital. My question is for Shabbos and the 3-day Yom Tif. If a patient comes in with a family member, the family member won't be allowed even into the emergency room and won't be allowed to intermittently visit the patient. We also closed our Bika Cholim apartments that we don't cohort more than one patient at once. What can the family member do to be able to go back home when they're no longer needed or able to be with their family member?
You should go back home right away, immediately.
By cab, by Uber, by...
If they think Uber is safe, they should go by Uber. If they think it's not safe, if their car is that they can drive their car home, it's pikuach nefesh.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and they would turn their car off, Bishinui, is that?
Don't drive, Bashir.
Okay. Rabbi Blank, you had your hand up?
No, I was going to ask the question for Simcha Silverman. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And same thing for me, because he had emailed both of us, so.
Okay, thank you. Are there anybody else who would like to raise a question, make a comment?
Can I ask
Okay.
a question?
Please.
Please.
I'm a chaplain with the military reserves. Ray Willig, thank you very much for your time. You addressed previously about Chilul Shabbos. In my experience in the army doesn't really put Shabbos when they plan movements. Shabbos is not really a factor. Is there any malkum to be makel in anything which is not the rice of Chilul Shabbos? Say getting into vehicle or other movement-related issues that the army expects of their chaplains.
The army's expectation notwithstanding, we keep Shabbos. The only time that a chaplain would be able to do Chilul Shabbos, if in his estimation, it's pikuach nefesh. Now, I cannot foresee every particular situation in the army, but there may be situations in which it's real pikuach nefesh. Then the person can do whatever has to be done. If it's what we call a chola she'ein bo sakana, there's no pikuach nefesh literally, then, as Rabbi Drash said before, we can do what we have to do b'shinoi, in an abnormal way. Some things cannot be done b'shinoi. You cannot drive a car b'shinoi. But if you have to do something else, some things, maybe your left hand, you have to write something, left hand is considered to be shinoi, is the Mishnah Masechta Shabbos. Other actions, you need a different kind of a shinoi. That can be maybe done if it's a chol l'shem b'sakana, but the raisa kedarkam only if it's yesh b'sakana.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else?
Rabbi Dratch?
Yes.
Hi. Moshe Mirsky from Daughters of Miriam. My question is, as far as visiting patients and pastoral visits, we know that the frum community is very hardly hit, and nursing home was a very dangerous environment. You know, there are places that it spread. So the question is, should the chaplain, it is my thought, I'm just finishing a quarantine, but should I greatly limit the visits that I make to the patients, the personal visits? Or can you give any, can Rabbi Willig give any guidelines to that?
The guidelines are, you must remain safe. What that means in particular, you have to consult experts in the field. You may have to wear gloves and masks. You may have to keep social distance of at least 6 feet away or even more. These are all precautions which must be taken. One cannot be lackadaisical about these things. There are very serious consequences. So with proper precautions, the presumption it would be okay.
I have a question.
Please.
David Keene. So normally if Rahman al-Islam, somebody passes away on Shabbos or Yom Tov, the family should not call the funeral home and make arrangements. But being that we might be stretched for room in any given morgue, might that be okay on Shabbos and Yom Tov?
It's okay. It's okay. There's even in different times, it may be okay for a non-Jew to call a funeral home, usually they're manned by non-Jews over the Shabbos, and tell them, please do what they call a removable. removal. Take away the mace from the house, bring the mace to the hospital or to the funeral home, as the case may be. This is allowed because although we're not permitted to expedite a burial, even through a non-Jew, that's clear. We're not trying to expedite. They don't want the mace to be in the house. They can't handle it for whatever reason, and they're asking to be taken to a place where it can be handled. That's usually a refrigerated box they have in the various morgues, and that's what should be done. Now, there's a lot of discussion in the Office of Emergency Management. What if all the morgues fill up, as we heard before? What do we do? Try to find a way to keep the body safe, to allow it to be buried, in due time when we can get Chevra Kadisha together, the medical examiner, whatever. The people are very, very busy these days. In some places, they're doing it with ice. I was told that, I maybe made a mistake, if I understand, I was told correctly, that in Toronto, Canada, the ice skating rink is empty, no hockey games, and arrangements were made, if necessary, to literally put the bodies on ice to be able to preserve them until they can be processed in a morgue and buried in the ground. In New York, the Office of Emergency Management was very concerned. Not enough graves, not enough cemeteries. What are we going to do? A couple of phone calls yielded the fact that out in Long Island itself, there are probably close at least 30,000 places to bury people. In those big hospitals on Farmingdale are empty in the back. We should never need these things, but we should know there is a capacity. It takes the time to line things up, etc. But the capacity is there. If chas v'shalom it's needed. I want to tell you a story that I heard this from Rabbi Meir Goldvich, Shlita, that time of the 6-Day War, they were so concerned that right behind his house where he lived in Shari Chesed, they had prepared a large area. I think he told me they prepared 10,000 coffins. No, the Arabs wanted to kill us all. I think if I'm not mistaken, he told me, thank God they would not need it. If I have it straight, where they had planned to Chalila v'chas have to bury people, they built the Wolfson Towers, some of those beautiful new buildings which rise behind the Shari Chesed community. May it be HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will that now too they're preparing these major contingency plans for all these difficult and terrible eventualities. May it be HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will that will not come to pass. You'll ask me, how is that possible? We can't flatten the curve so fast. Hayad Hashem Tiktzar. If the Rebbeinu Shalom wants, the plague will end now. How? We don't know how. It started. He started. He can end it. We're not required to look for the way it can happen. We are required to daven to Kadosh Baruch Hu, to do tshuva, and leave it in Kadosh Baruch Hu's hands, and take all the necessary precautions.
So just to be clear, Rabbi Willig, it should be done if somebody passed away on Shabbos Yom Tov. Those arrangements should be made through an Eino Yehudi.
Correct.
Okay. Well, thank you. Okay, Rabbi Domish, this will be the last question because it's getting late.
Sure. Thank you, Rabbi Willig. Pleasure to see you again. But I guess piggybacking off the last question, I've seen reports coming out of some countries in Europe where they're making requirements that burials have to be done within 24 hours or they're just going to cremate the body.
That's what the Torah says.
Right, yeah, but the issue being if somebody's nifter just before or on Shabbos, then...
Let him be buried on Shabbos to a non-Jew rather than be cremated. No, not even a question.
Okay. So if such a thing were to happen here, that's what we would say the same thing.
There's no such rule right now. But if
right, no, that's what I'm saying.
100%.
Okay.
Rabbi Drash, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. I just want you to know that even before I finished asking the question, Rabbi Willig said yes, agreed to be here for the chaplains, and it's very, very much appreciated. And the chizuk that you've given the people on the call tonight will go a long way in helping them continue the Avodas HaKodesh in which they're engaged, and I thank you very much, in which everybody good health and strength and safety, and Be'ezus Hashem, we'll see you
Mark.
short. Karav B'yamin.
And everyone
Before you
have a
stop,
back
would this be available? Sorry?
I'm sorry?
Would this be available, this tape?
With Rabbi Willig's
Mark?
permission. With Rabbi Willig's permission.
I give permission. I give permission. I want to wish everybody the new way of saying it. We usually say Chag Kosher v'Sameach. We say Chag Bori v'Kosher v'Sameach.
Amen.
Thank you very much.
And I got to talk to Rabbi Dratch also for the arrangement.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night. Good night.
Thank you, Rabbi Dratch and Rabbi Kramer and Rabbi Willig.
Thank you.
So, thank you all.